All right, everybody. Welcome to the SYRCL Happy Hour Storyteller event. This is something I've been really looking forward to for quite a while. As many of you know, this is the 25th anniversary of the Wild and Scenic South Yuba River victory being won. And it has given me the opportunity to have a lot of long, kind of in-depth conversations with these folks and a number of other people about what that time was like. And it felt like a really opportune moment to share that story and really what it means to take a grassroots organization and a grassroots movement and that energy and make meaningful change, both as a sort of inspiration for the Wild and Scenic Film Festival itself and in this moment politically and kind of throughout history, right? It takes communities moving and advocating for change. It doesn't happen naturally. It takes effort and it takes big fights and strong personalities. And so with that, I'm going to introduce our kind of motley crew here. Starting up there at the very end, we have the upstart newcomer, Roger Hicks. Next to Roger, we have our dewy-eyed intern of the time, Carlisle Miller. I'm a little confused about this next one. I just see a blank line where it looks like somebody should have written something in, but I no idea what that would be. So we're going to call her Izzy Martin. Next to Izzy, the Brit, Janet Cohen. And finally, next to Janet, our obligatory long-haired hippie, John Regan. My name is Aaron Zetlerman. I'm the current executive director of SYRCL, the South Yuba River Citizens League, and the baby of the group. So I'm going to start out. We're going to have a couple of questions, very broad, to kind of learn about that moment, but I want to encourage you all, if you have questions, if you have a different memory of how a certain party or event that they are alluding to ended, feel free to chime in and help correct that narrative a little bit. But to start, I want to have you kind of set the stage a little bit for the why, right? We all appreciate the river, we all love the river, and I think many people in this room understand that it wasn't always going to be a river. It could have been a couple of very dead reservoirs. And so talk a little bit about that threat and that process of going from, hey, there's a threat here that we need to do something about, to this is the moment and this is how we are going to win it.
So I moved here in 1979 because of the Yuba, and had to go to Sacramento for a few years to finish my medical training. I moved back in 1984, and there were two federally licensed dam projects on the Yuba. One at Hoyt's Crossing at Miners Tunnel, which is like the most popular swimming hole on the river, and one just upstream of there at the New Rome Powerhouse. And I was like, what the fuck? I mean, we couldn't believe it. And we knew that, we being me and my wife Linda, that people in the community, we moved here because of the river, and a lot of other people in the community love the river. It's like at the time, it was like, the thing was, oh, this is the heart of the river, of the community, is the Yuba River. So we just, I don't know, we got that, somehow channeled that love for the river that we felt in the community into mobilizing people by making a lot of, taking the organization that Vince Hoy, where's Vince is here. Okay, I don't see him, but he's there. Ah, there he is. Okay. Vince and some others had started SYRCL and created the name, the South Yuba River Citizens League, in 1983. And, we came back here in the summer of '84 and just got involved. And from there, built this organization. Joe Bell, right here, was critical with all his legal interventions, both on behalf of SYRCL and the Sierra Nevada group of the Sierra Club, filings with FERC, and and then a classmate of Joe's from the new school in law school in Berkeley helped us incorporate. We became a 501c3, and I could go on forever because this has been a big part of my adult life. But I will pass the mic to Carlisle. Carlisle and I, just a little fun fact here, went to the same high school in upstate New York, Brighton High School.
I want to,
Just a few years apart, too.
if I could, I wanted to back up in one sense and say one of the things that people don't realize today is that 25 years ago, a dam could have been built on the South Yuba River. It could have been built by a company from outside our community, outside our state, even outside our country. One of the SYRCL licenses involved a French national power company. And there was... nuclear, isn't that great? And there was nothing that we could have done as a community to stop that. So think about how different that is. The threat of a new dam on the South Yuba was very, very real, and at some point seemed very likely and very possible. And so technically, how do you stop that? It's with something called Wild and Scenic River designation. There is a federal Wild and Scenic designation that prevents the construction of new dams and impoundments and reservoirs. But the cool thing about the state, the California Wild and Scenic River system and the act is it bans state licenses being granted to projects. And those projects, even if they have that federal license, they still need the state water permit. So that was kind of our backdoor in. And SYRCL had previously run a legislative campaign to get state Wild and Scenic designation.
We had two bills. Yes.
Two bills.
One in 1986, and that failed. We went to the Board of Supervisors, presented this bill, and they thought, oh, great, which was because everybody loves the river. But then they heard from all the right-wingers in the community, and a few weeks later they rescinded their approval of that. And then it didn't go anywhere in the state legislature because our county board of supervisors didn't support it.
Yeah. And so then a couple of things came together. One was the election of a 4-to-1 environmental board of supervisors in 1998, which included Izzy Martin. So we had flipped the board from 4-to-1 conservative in the span of 2 election cycles to a 4-to-1 environmental, which freaked a lot of right-wingers out. It would be like the Berkeley City Council electing like a John Birch Society, MAGA majority. The other thing that happened was the Yuba County, what was then the Yuba County Water Agency, now the Yuba Water Agency, dusted off a bunch of old plans for dams throughout the watershed, and it included 2 potential dams on the South Yuba, or that would impact the South Yuba. One at Parks Bar that would have buried the state park at Englebright, at Bridgeport, under around 200 feet of water, and the other one at Edwards Crossing, and it would have flooded 13 miles of the river all the way up to and including part of the town of Washington. Yeah, 600-foot high dam. It would have been like the second highest in the state or the country or something. And I remember Sean Garvey, who we have to invoke here, then executive director, and my good friend in politics, we did political consulting. When we saw the headline, or we saw that study come out, we were like, oh yeah, baby. We are going to take this and ram it so far up their butts. And we got headlines in the Union, front page stories, 7 new dams proposed for the Yuba River, town of Washington threatened by new dam, and that became the rationale for doing the bill.
I feel like someone should introduce Izzy as more than just a blank line because there is a story there.
I'll just go now. I'll leave.
You tell the story. That's
Yeah.
why,
Are you going to talk about what happened between 1983 and? Okay, great. So when John says we got a 4-to-1 majority on the board, part of that was that Izzy Martin ran as a write-in candidate. Her name was not on the ballot, which is just your odds of winning a candidacy like that are 0. And she won because she ran a great campaign and because So
Can I just add that everybody here has to understand that we didn't have the internet. There was no internet. Well, there was minimal sort of email, and people who were members of SYRCL used to wander in and say, I'm a member, I should be able to use your email. I mean, seriously, they thought that membership bought them internet access. So everything you're hearing now is pre-internet. It's pre-cell phone, old school organizing.
And I want to point out we were lots younger. But I moved to Nevada County in 1986, but I started swimming in the Yuba River when I was a tiny baby, fell in love with it, and I moved to Nevada County to save the river as part of my mission in life, partly because in the 1970s I had the pleasure and the tragedy of getting to float the Stanislaus River just before it was filled, and saying goodbye to those creeks, and saying goodbye to those rocks, and saying goodbye to those sacred places that we didn't even get to know about. And we were never, ever going to let a dam be built in this state again. They were threatening us with the Auburn Dam. They were threatening us with dams on the Yuba. In 1991, I found myself facilitating a board of directors meeting of SYRCL at my farm. This was 1991. And we started to talk about what do we need to do. We managed to get, I was on the planning commission for 2 tours in the 90s, and we managed to get protecting the South Yuba into the general plan. How did we do that? Because these idiots had produced these documents that showed the inundation rings, we could say, that barn your great-grandpa built, it's going to be under 300 feet of water. So the right wing started to sort of dissolve, and we saw that they were in favor of our designation. 1998 comes along. I'm working on this woman named Nancy Kale's campaign. I'm there with Roger and John and me, and we're working on her campaign, and she tells us, I can't do it.
2 months before.
Right. She told us after the deadline to put your name on the ballot. Her name was going to be on the ballot. We're working on her campaign, and she says, I'm being threatened, I'm frightened, and I won't run. So we leave her office down in Penn Valley. We drive to the Yuba. We start to throw rocks in the river and scream. And then I believe it was this lovely gentleman that first turned to me and said, you're going to have to run as a writing candidate. And I'm like, yeah. Nobody can do that. But then it turns out when your friends recruit you, some people run for office because they feel since they were a child they had a special vision and they knew that they should be a leader. Don't elect those people. When somebody comes and says, my friends are beating me up, they want me to run. 2 reasons. They're not an egotist, and they have friends. Friends that are going to help them. And that's what happened. I was able to win first person in California history as a writing candidate. It sounds harder than it was. In Santa Clara, you'd need to have 200,000 people write your name in. In Nevada County, we needed about 2,000 people to do it, so it was not as hard as you might think. But the main point I want to make is by taking power on the Board of Supervisors, one of the things we knew was my district, 80% of the Republican men in my district were opposed to that dam. So all we had to do, and why was that? SYRCL. SYRCL made it political suicide to be in favor of that dam. All I had to say was, elect me, we'll save the river. Because what we had to teach them was how to write you in. And then the last point I want to make was because Nevada County Board of Supervisors sponsored the bill, and then we hired the best lobbyist in California, the late Phil Eisenberg, to work with me, and the county went in. We and Friends of the River were the sponsors of the bill because the legislature had never heard of SYRCL or the Yuba or anything. What we discovered when John and I get elected. And we start to talk to people about and we can talk to details about this. How do you get a bill passed? It took a lot of work. We were all, she can talk about all of the grassroots lobbying that went on. But Vince just introduced me to somebody as the point of the spear, because that's true. I was the point of the spear in the Capitol. I had a really good spear carrier partner, John Regan. He was fabulously handsome, and all the women and men in the Capitol were like, what do you want? What do you want? Whatever you want, we'll do it. He had hair. But the point about a point of a spear, so much hair. The point of a spear, if it's just the teeny little point, goes, whoop. Point of the spear only works if there's a spear. SYRCL was the spear. South Yuba River citizens sing. We can save a river, and we did.
So I'll go next, actually. So I actually moved straight from London to Nevada City. I had never, until about 6 months ago, I've never lived anywhere other than Nevada City in America. And I had first come here in the 70s, and I had seen the Yuba. You know, I was just touring, cruising around the country as a 23-year-old English woman, and I came across the Yuba, and there were naked people lying around under bridges. And it was like, what the hell is this? And we eventually came and lived here because of the river in 1986. We all sort of seemed to live, 1987, we all sort of moved at the same time. And I couldn't believe that this wasn't protected. I mean, I simply couldn't believe it. Because in England, if you had something like this, it had to be public because it was so absolutely extraordinary. And I think I met you the first time I met you was at a meeting about the new 49 bridge. And I couldn't believe they were going to build a ridiculous bridge over the Yuba. You know, I come from England where you've got Roman bridges and stuff. And I eventually became the office manager in the very early days with Mary Hoy, who's the director. And then I actually went off and earned some money as opposed to working for nothing for a while. And then came back when the amazing Sean Garvey, who is unfortunately not here because I credit him with the vision for this. I volunteered. This is how you groom volunteers. I volunteered to run an auction and raise them a bunch of money, and then they asked me to be the, what was I? Deputy director. Yes. Deputy director. And I had to do everything that they told me to do. But it was one of those things of, we're going to save this river. This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. This cannot be threatened. Just as a side issue, the Wild Scenic Film Festival, we started to drum home to the local population and the local businessmen and women that the environment brought money into economic development into the community. And we'll come to this later. But we started the film festival, Kathy and I, when I became executive director, we started the festival to really bring home the fact that A, the river was wild and scenic now, and B, it brought a hell of a lot of money into the area. But anyway, I'm going to pass over to Carlisle. You got it.
As usual, she's very well organized.
Yeah, so my name's Carlisle. I moved actually to Nevada County for a friend, Malika Bishop, because I was in Las Vegas studying desert tortoises, and when my internship was done, they said, great, we'll hire you to walk in front of the tractors and clear the tortoises off the land. And I said, no, thank you. I'm going to move somewhere where I know someone, and Malika mailed us the yellow pages and a couple of postcards of the Yuba River and said, you should move here. And so we did. And when I moved here, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I was a biology major and I wanted to do something for the environment. And Malika said, well, you need to talk to SYRCL then. And I was lucky enough that they were kind of looking for an intern at the time, and I kind of made a job for myself by being willing to do everything and anything.
For no money.
For no money at first, and then for a little money, and then it was like, okay, now I need a job. And I realized that I'm privileged to have been able to do that and grateful that the timing worked out. But when I started working there, I became the membership and volunteer coordinator, which was an incredible time to walk into the organization because, as Roger said, people like Vince had been organizing, and Janet and Izzy had been organizing since 1983 to build awareness about what wild and scenic meant. Because when you first brought it to the legislature, the Board of Supervisors shut it down because it was CABPRO, California Business and Property Owners, said, you're going to tell all the property owners on the river what color they can paint their house. And they don't want you to tell. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes, and how the UN is going to have helicopters flying over the canyon. Remember that? That was in the Union. That was in the Union newspaper, article about, or a letter about how the UN would send helicopters here.
So you may recognize this phenomenon where there's a lot of misinformation being put out about what's going to happen if something passes. And so the work that SYRCL members and SYRCL employees and SYRCL volunteers had done to get us to a point so that I could walk in, like I'm getting chills, I could walk in 1997 and have a list of several thousand volunteers who were ready to drop everything at a phone call was incredible. And the way they got there, and I don't know if one of you can tell this better than me, but they had house parties at the river and concerts, but I think a lot of the work happened at people like Pascal and Susan Levitz, that they would say, hey, you're my neighbors, and they lived in the River Canyon, and they're in the Wild and Scenic boundaries of the river. And so they invited all of their friends and neighbors and said, hey, I've heard about this, I've read about it, there's a lot of misinformation, will you come to my house? SYRCL's gonna come and give a presentation. And so SYRCL would come out and give a presentation to 20 neighbors, and house party by house party by house party, opinion piece to the union, opinion piece to the union, slowly countering this false narrative with true information about what Wild and Scenic does and doesn't do, and the studies about what Wild and Scenic does to your property values. And it was incredibly beneficial. And they managed to turn a 4-to-1 negative board of supervisors to the majority of the, I don't remember what.
A 4-to-1 pro,
Right.
Wild and Scenic.
But you had some huge percentage of the property owners, yeah?
So that brilliantly segues to like where we're all going naturally, but I'm going to kind of name it for everybody. It was grassroots. It was community organizing. It was talking to people and your neighbors. And so I'm sorry I interrupted a little bit because the energy is there already, but talk about that.
It was not just neighbors. I mean, Susan Levitz, the people behind YubaNet, Susan Levitz originally, she lived in the Yuba Canyon, and she did this incredible property owners committee, she and Susan Nance, and they basically kept people updated. I don't like the word groomed, but they really kept the property owners involved. But Kerry Timmer, who was the executive director in who knows when, 90s, she started courting the Chamber of Commerce and businesses. The first day she was there, as executive director, one of the supervisors had written a letter to the union calling her the River Vixen and calling for a boycott of SYRCL. And she not groomed again.
Boycott signs in businesses all up and down Broad Street.
Right. It happened in such a different way than it does now. It wasn't on social media. It was actually in the stores. It was actually in the paper. And she went to Chamber of Commerce after Chamber of Commerce meeting. She, nullified business opposition. I mean, for 16 years, it was 16 years of nullifying property owner opposition, nullifying business opposition, changing the board of supervisors. I mean, this took 16 years.
Yeah, so that's one of the lessons about impacting policy, making change. It takes time. In this day and age, you think you can reach 1 billion people with a stupid tweet, and there's an old saying that a lie can travel around halfway across the world before the truth gets its pants on. That's true too. But at the end of the day, you need to have a community and a committed community behind you, an effective organization. You need to know what the hell you're talking about. When we went down to the Capitol, we were able to combat every bit of misinformation, every lie, every batshit crazy thing the opposition said because of the work that Carlisle was talking about. Years and years of opposition. There's this idea that you can use your opponent's hammers against you to sharpen the sword of your own argument. And it's what we did. Every argument they threw at us, we saw as an opportunity to flip it around and for it to become a strength. So when they said it's going to violate people's property, Wild and Scenic would violate people's property rights, we were able to show them surveys showing 95% of the river owners of River Canyon property supported Wild and Scenic. And we were able to do that over and over and over again. And I remember Phil Eisenberg, who was this powerhouse lobbyist for some very good causes. At one meeting, he just looked at us, at Izzy and I, and he was like, "You guys really know what you're talking about." He was like, you'd be amazed at how many people in this building, the state capitol, have no idea what they're talking about. And so it also bought us credibility. So we had the organization, we had the community, we had the electeds, which goes a long way when you're talking to other electeds. And we had the arguments, and we had the facts on our side. That doesn't always get you where you want to go, but you can't get where you want to go. You can't get a win without those things.
We also had visuals. One of the things that we did, I mean, the river is extraordinarily beautiful, as you all know, they walked out of one meeting one day and said, we need a screensaver. And it was like, these are the days when screensavers had to be put on your computer on a disk. So I was tasked with finding beautiful photos, and this was pre-PD, and it was pre-easy anything on the computer. So I remember spending an entire weekend finding photos of the Yuba, giving them to Joe Crane, actually, and he made this screensaver. We then went down on a lobby day, and we went into every single senator and congressman's office, assemblyman. Lobby day is when you go down and you talk to them all and you say, yeah, we had high school students and God knows who, and we gave everybody one of these screensavers. And we actually got screensavers banned because everybody, Republicans, Democrats, everybody had the beautiful screensaver of the Yuba going in their offices. And I think that they... Yes, on SB 496. And so that ended screensavers.
They didn't ban it until we got the bill passed. I want to talk about that visual.
Hold on, one thing. I want to stop. The story of the screensaver is the beta test version, which did get onto some people's computers, had this beautiful photo of a swimming hole on the Yuba. Carlisle just learned tonight. It was a photo of her. And if you looked closely enough, you could see how did people swim in the South Yuba. And she was sort of in the water, and there was a bubble screen around her, so you couldn't see it at first glance. But folks in the Capitol noticed. They were like, there's a naked woman on that computer screen. So we did a second version.
Well, I want to talk about the importance of the visuals, because when we started to go, remember, what you're hearing about now is what we did in Nevada County. We're about 0.1% of the voting electorate of California. So talk about the tip of the spear with no spear. We needed Friends of the River. They can't be ignored as we talk about this. We would have gotten nowhere without them. The reason I say that is when John and I first went into the Capitol, we were talking to people about our river. Now realize most of the people in the state live in the southern part of the state, where a river to them is a cement canal.
LA River.
The LA River cement canal, but so many more than that. Even in the Bay Area, and people were like, why do you care about it? We don't even know what you're talking about. So he started to bring in these beautiful photographs of the river, and then, of course, Joe went wild, and then we had the screensaver. And at that point, we would walk into an office, and we'd see the screensaver come up, yes, on 496, save the Yuba River. And because we had a great connection with the president of the Senate, that wasn't banned until right after we got our bill passed. But I want to talk about that piece, because again, it's not good enough if our little community is organized, but Friends of the River we had all cried rivers of tears when we lost the Stanislaus. It was horrible. It was like being killed over and over again every time you looked at what was happening. So we were, and that Friends of the River had done everything they could to stop that. So they had created little Friends of Rivers all over the state. So when we stepped forward, when Nevada County Board of Supervisors sponsored that bill, SYRCL was a proud member of Friends of the River, and we got everybody in the state to know what was happening and to call their legislators. So there was a certain point where John and I were in the Capitol. It was towards the end of this fight. We were having a bad fight. We were trying to pass a water bond. We had learned from Phil Eisenberg and his colleague Allison Harvey, who is chief of staff for the Senate president, we had learned that we had to be in favor of that proposition because it had flood control money in it. So we had to be yes on Prop 13, which is what the number it became, yes on that bill. And those guys were all no on our bill. So we had to lobby to get their bill passed while we were They were trying to kill the bill we were working on. At a certain point, John and I were walking through the corridor, and the person from the Davis, the woman that represented, it was Helen Thomas. Helen Thomas's chief of staff, who later became the director of the state parks. She comes running at us down the hallway and says, "What are you guys doing?" We're like, "We don't know what you're talking about." And they said, "Our phone lines are melting. We can't."
Can I tell you the background to
Well,
that?
we tell it. I mean, I'm just telling you that because of that, and it wasn't the only place the phones were melting. One of my secret agents was a daycare lady that watched my babies for me, and she knew every daycare person in California. Kathy Cullen. So she's calling San Diego. She's calling Bakersfield. The legislators can't believe it because this is just one little river they'd never heard of. And every legislator was being bombarded. Now your turn.
So what happened was Izzy phones me up and says, "We have to get everybody to phone Helen Thompson." and then I talk to Carlisle and go, "We have to get everybody to phone Helen Thompson."
No, what happened was Janet hung up the phone and goes, "We need 1,000 phone calls into Helen Thompson's office in the next 2 hours." And I went, like, I can't call that many people. Like, I can't call all those people. And she goes, "Carla, breathe. You're not going to make all the calls to the people. You're going to call 100 people, and each of those 100 people are going to call 20 more people, and we will get the 2,000 calls." And so I was there getting from our database lists of people who had given us money, who had indicated support, and printing those lists out, and then faxing them to supporters who had been in our database as volunteers and saying, "This is it, guys. We've been working for however many years on getting this passed. The time is here. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. I need you to make 20 phone calls." And everybody was like, "Give me 40. And so I'm faxing them numbers. And it was either a bar or a barber shop in Yuba City who was like, "I'm going to talk everybody here. I'm going to give them a free beer if they make the phone call," And so we got thousands of calls until finally I think they called the office and you were like, "They're telling us to stop." And we were like, "Okay, stop." And we had to call all the volunteers and say, "Stop calling
The
people."
exact words were, "Call the dogs off."
And it kept going on that way. The reason this was so important was a bill goes through lots and lots of committees. There's a policy committee, a money committee, then the floor, and then the other policy committee, money committee, the floor. We did not have a single spare vote in any of those committees or floor vote. Not one. Every single vote we had to have. So the point is, I think, really important and to take into the future is it still has to be person by person. I don't think this would work anymore with social media. How many people are getting way too many asks for like 15 a day, people asking you for money for some campaign you've never heard of? That wasn't going on back then. But we had this network of activists, and SYRCL was always, in some ways, the shiny jewel in the crown of the river organizations. So that building of a strong organization. I remember in 1991, 35 years ago, people said, I said, "What's your mission?" We were talking about that. And they said, "Wild and Scenic." I said, "Okay, we get that. And then what do we do?" And they're like, "Oh, we all go home and take a vacation." I'm like, no, because it was you weren't there yet with us. And I'm like, "No, but will that stop the forestry practices? How about the contamination in the river? You're going to have to," and people were like, "No. We can't just get Wild and Scenic and go home." But look what's happened. Look what's happened. Wild and Scenic was the door that opened us into this. It wasn't the end.
The credibility that it gave us was huge. That, and then Janet and Kathy taking it and saying, "We're going to make a film festival so that nobody can ever say anything bad about SYRCL again." And it's true. It's really interesting to see the difference now working here from working here back in 97. I come and go.
SYRCL at the time,
Hiatus, right?
SYRCL's entire budget when it ran the Wild and Scenic campaign was around $60,000. I can guarantee you, Yuba County Water Agency spent more than $60,000 lobbying against the bill. They hired the biggest lobbying firm in the state of California, a firm that had millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars in lobbying revenue. They had every water agency, every water district in the state. They had all the big ag interests arrayed against us. So the whole like David and Goliath thing is like one of the most overplayed comparisons. We weren't even David. Like we were a little chipmunk or something up against Goliath. We were the sling. Well, yeah. And the town was, and SYRCL was the David. I think it's really important to remember something. When you're doing difficult work, make room for fun. Have fun doing it. Do it with cool people that you like. Do it with friends. Do it with family. You get exhausted doing work, man. It'll chew you up and burn you out. So on the weekends, we spent weeks doing all this hard work. On the weekends, we made a point, get to the river. Like, go out and enjoy what you're fighting to protect. So have fun. Do it with good people. Have parties and dance. Drink, smoke, whatever your gummy thing is. On the night that we got it passed, we sat in Jeff Shelito's office, and he opened a really nice bottle of single malt. And we sat there toasting our victory, and they could smell the scotch. Yeah, and paper cups. And they were like, we heard from people later on, they were like, yeah, we could smell the scotch all the way down the hall to the door to the assembly.
All right, so I'm going to, Jeff Shell, a couple of things. John mentioned the French nuclear power company. So one day in the late 80s, there was this envelope on our doorstep, Lyndon's my doorstep, with, unmarked envelope with information about the French Connection. There was a movie at the time called The French Connection, and this was, this French government department and also a French nuclear power company was funding these two dams. So that was like, for me, earth-shaking, and, we made the most out of that. That's one thing that I wanted to mention. Please. Go.
Everything that's been said so far I find really engaging and nice memories. But remember, we have three elements in our government, and the judicial element is very important in water management all the way to Washington, D.C. When that envelope was opened, Roger and I looked at it, and chills went down our back because there was a contract between Electricité de France and Northwest Power.
Oh, yeah.
Northwest Power had their offices in the Embarcadero Center in San Francisco, and a Mr. Doolittle, there was two Doolittles in the election at that time. And anyway, so there was a lot of stuff for almost a full year. The license to build Miners Tunnel was issued May 1st, 1985. SYRCL was barely together, but SYRCL had a strong advocacy in the populace, and there was certainly a lot of work that you all did in the legislature. But the reality is that we had different initials, but the FERC, you could substitute some other letters, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, with the guidance that the Congress had issued, PURPA, Public Utility Policy Regulatory Act, which allowed small hydro dams. And that proposal was positively received, and we made multiple complaints and communications to FERC seeking better environmental analysis, which was almost none. And it did help, I think, that the whole process got postponed while SYRCL grew. And I'm reading what gave me a chill when I got this in the mail. This order constitutes the final agency action. Request for rehearing by the commission by any a request to reopen the issue of Miners Tunnel and Northwest Power. Those things were for my life for a year, and I got, I want to say, a lot of help, particularly from Friends of the River, American Rivers. I even went back to Washington, D.C. to talk to the FERC, and they didn't give me much of an ear, but even going to our congressman in the Congress, I made some small power going against the power that Northwest Power was going to have, and that's what I had.
Thank you so much, Joe. Yeah, another instrumental person in this fight, and clearly the lawyer and the legal expertise in there. So, I do want to kind of, before we open, to see if there are comments or stories or questions from people in the audience. I do want to kind of take a moment, and we've talked about the community organizing. We've talked about all of the different points of the spear and then the weight that you need for that spear to actually be effective. But I would be somewhat remiss in at least thinking about the future and asking a little bit about the lessons for the future, how you think about advocacy. I mean, you are all still involved in this work in one way or another. And what carries through from what you've learned 25 years ago and more? And what have you learned? What's adapted? What is not new? What are the hard lessons that you're trying to figure out how to approach differently?
So thanks. I'll take the first stab at that. And I do want to acknowledge Jeff Shelito, who was supposed to be here tonight, but has, he's ill with this respiratory virus that's going around that a lot of people have had. So Jeff was a staffer in the California legislature for Byron Chair, and he was the staffer for our first Wild and Scenic Bill in 1986, and then for the successful one in 1999 for Byron Chair. And so thank you, Jeff. He's been mentioned here and was supposed to be here. So, but in answer to what you brought up, Aaron, I would say there's this proverb that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so, that's for me, that is the basic lesson of SYRCL success. It's a community organization, and we worked together over the years. And I think, yes, Friends of the River was very important, and they helped us greatly. And now look at what SYRCL is doing and where Friends of the River is, and it's because SYRCL is a community-based organization, in my opinion. And we have the strength of all of the community here, or not all, but many people in the community for what we're doing. So, yeah, that's my take on it. And one last thing is, as John said, make it fun. If you're doing this kind of work, you gotta have fun, and you gotta do it with people, who want to have fun and make things enjoyable and celebrate the victories, no matter how small, because things can get really dark, and it looks like, oh, it's how are we ever going to do this? But through that darkness, just celebrate the victories.
Yeah, amen to that, for sure. There is another adage that all politics is local, and I've become increasingly convinced that all power ultimately is local as well. We're all getting fed way too much information from all around the world. It's all there at your fingertips. Take a break from that shit. Focus on those nearest and dearest to you, your own community, and your community might be virtual. There may be you're closer and in touch with people on the other side of the world because you're concerned about and activated and galvanized by a common issue. That's fine. That's your community. Start there, and feed your soul, feed your heart, work with good people, have fun. Don't forget to take a break. touch grass and reconnect with the thing. Yeah, all kind, whatever you do, man. Hey, we're all groovy. And if you're fighting to save a river, spend time on the river. If you're fighting to save an old building, spend time in the old building. You know, whatever you're doing, and don't let your soul get polluted by all the other garbage out there. There's too much good and beauty in this world, and good fights to be won, and good people to fight them with.
Yeah, I would say one of the things I think in this day and age with social media, it's really easy to discount the enemy as being stupid or wrong or evil. And I think if SYRCL had done that back in 1983, it wouldn't be what it is today. They spent years talking to people that disagreed with them and changing their minds with love. And I think the more that we can do that going forward and build those personal connections on a local level, like John was saying, with the people that you actually know and have a relationship with in real life, the more that you'll be able to hear each other, and that if we can really take the time to hear and understand where each other's coming from, we have so much more common ground than social media would have us believe and the politicians would have us believe. And if we take the time to build on that common ground and empathize with each other, we're going to have a lot more success.
I come from a very, very large extended family in England, and I believed that we needed to replicate the extended family in SYRCL. So we would do things like send people birthday cards, and they would come into the office and say, "You were the only person who sent me a birthday card." We would send people, cards when they got married. We knew what people were doing. We were very close to our members. We had a lot of parties, lots of parties. We'd always, Mary Hoy had always had a lot of concerts. We believed in drinking. I believed in, it's a large Jewish family, I believed in food. So we always fed people, they drank, they danced. We're much older now, we don't dance so much. But I don't. It was like, you have to have fun doing this. You have to give people T-shirts. You have to give people honors. You have to really build the family. And I think that all movements need to do that. And understand that it takes a hell of a long time to do anything real in terms of change. It was 16 years to do this. And in the 15th year, as we were about to win, hopefully about to win, a small group of us, it was Carlisle and Sean, who we haven't talked enough about. Sean was heroic. He was the executive director. We went up to the mountains and we had some sort of retreaty thing. And it was like, okay, what are we going to say when we win? What is our next move? We were planning ahead for salmon restoration. It was like, we're going to stand up on that stage and say, yay, we won. Now we're going to return the salmon to the Yuba. Long view, long time, build a family, drink and eat, dance and have parties. And seriously, that's how we could start the film festival. We had hundreds of volunteers. I felt I could do, because I took over as executive director, I felt I could do anything with this enormous family of volunteers that we had. Luckily, we hired Kathy, so we started the film festival. This giant, hundreds of people doing, hundreds of people in the cleanup, and we fed them a huge lunch. Hundreds of people helping with the film festival. Hundreds of people doing whatever we asked them to do. It's a magnificent movement in a very small town. There are many lessons here, and Izzy is going to give us an inspiring final speech. I know.
I'm going to get up and dance. Thank you, Janet. I really want to emphasize how important it is to be always heading forward and knowing where you are on that path. I literally started working, I fell in love with the Yuba when I was 4 or 5. I wanted to work on saving the Yuba and the Stanislaus and the American, but there was no way to really do that, so I started, because where does the water go? It goes to farming. So I spent 20 years helping build the organic food industry. And people would say, why, and farm worker poisoning, did the whole farming thing, because that's where the water was going. That's why they wanted to build the dams. And people would say, why are you doing this? I'm like, I'm trying to save the Yuba River. And like, we're at the Ecological Farming Conference. What are you talking about? We have a new challenge, and something people don't realize about Engelbreit, that dam that's blocking that big piece of cement that's keeping our fish from coming back, was built so they could start hydraulic mining again in the upper Yuba. It's a mining feature. In the 1940s, and then they finished it in the 1950s, just about when I was born. That thing there is not for power. It's not for flood control. It's not for any of that stuff. It was so they could hydraulically mine again. So debris control, because it caught all the debris that was coming down the river, and that's why people say they banned hydraulic mining. Hydraulic mining has not been banned. It's perfectly legal. What's illegal is to have the rocks from your property roll onto my property. That's what that dam was about. So we were able to be very articulate, but then what happens next is I start to think, wait, what else happened with that Yuba, without all that mining? And we started to look upstream. SYRCL started to look upstream, and the organization that I was working on and that John was on our board forever, looked upstream, and we saw this mess of mines up there that had never been remediated. Every time it rains, that river turns to look like cafe au lait or, whatever drink, matcha, whatever you guys drink. It looked horrible. That is running out of Malakoff-Dugan State Park. It's a Clean Water Act violation. Those guys got a free pass to continue contaminating the river every time it rains, and they haven't reclaimed that mine yet. So I spent the next 20 years trying to figure out how to clean up those old mines. Why? Because they want to build new mines. They're trying to build them right now. They have tried 3 times to open a mine in this county, and we have defeated it every time. 5-0 last time. 5-0. And our county is being sued for their bravery by a terrible, terrible actor, a Canadian mining company, who wants to come, doesn't care about any of us. They thought they could buy this county board of supervisors. The 2 Trumpers on that board schooled the mining company when they were voting 5-0 to shut it down. They schooled them, and they're standing up for us. But mining is coming in elsewhere because the price of gold. In 1973, when Richard Nixon deregulated the price of gold, he said, okay, we're going to let that market decide. Gold was $37 an ounce. Today, it's $5,100 plus an ounce. The pressure on our rivers, where the heart of the gold strike, is real. It hasn't gone away. We have to make it. It's political suicide to run in favor of that dam in Nevada County. We need to carry that into the rest of the Sierra, where the rest of the gold is. We need to remind people that it's not a hole in the ground. A mine is not a hole in the ground. There's a young woman here who's got amazing photographs. I'm really hoping she will send them to me, of abandoned mines. Have you seen Malakoff-Dugan? There she is. You are young. And she's not going to be dead in 40 years like the rest of us. But the point is, the fight hasn't stopped. The Yuba is still threatened by new mines, by old mines. It's not a hole in the ground. It's a mountain of mine tailings. There's no way to remove that gold without removing the mountain of mine tailings, which are filled with, because of where we live, things like arsenic and lead, which are naturally occurring. There's also a bunch of mercury that was used in gold mining. That's just one. So I spent the next 20 years, again, trying to save my river, figure out how we can take that debris control dam down. And you can't really, because right now that junk's still floating down, going down the river. So SYRCL has adapted their strategy to do not just Wild and Scenic, and they still have lots of fun parties with food, but to pay attention to the forest, what's going on in the forest, what's going on with the mines, fighting any new mines. And I think that, and because the mines, what was there before there was a mine? It was either a meadow or a forest. That's the choices before we got here. So meadow restoration, they're all over it. Working in the forest, they're all over it. But there's more to do, and I think it's partly teaching the rest of the Sierra how to fight the way Nevada County fights. I'm working from Bishop to Quincy, fighting the new mines. There's a mine proposed for Quincy. There's several coming in around Bishop in the desert. And guess what? Everybody says, it's just the desert. It won't hurt it. Most fragile ecosystem on Earth, that's all. So I just want to say thank you to SYRCL, who's been really, really effective, still here, fighting harder, not letting go of the vision, but knowing we are on a path that continues. As I said, in 1991, I had a little tiny baby in my lap. Now he's a professor at Georgetown. But at the time, people were like, oh, it's going to be a short fight. We'll get Wild and Scenic and go away. No, there is no, it's always, it's eternal. That's why we have to work with each other. I loved her words about love, her words about food and booze, dancing, having fun, but not in a way like, oh, it's fun. It's more like we are effective. You know what's fun is winning.
Hear, hear. Well, thank you all. I think, yeah, we'll go one comment question over there. Yeah, and then I'll kind of close us out. You want to run the mic?
I'm running the mic.
Well, you said you wanted to dance. Yeah.
Well, and she's now Mary Berglund. Congratulations to her and stuff. If I could just take a couple minutes. But Mary right now probably is going, how come it's not federal Wild and Scenic yet or something like that? But she was the first executive director, how our home phone got to be downtown. And had to put up with a lot of vitriol of the kind you can imagine, but she had a lot of support from all the river people. But she and I had been veterans of watching the Stanislaus Canyon get drowned in its own juices, quite soul-crushing. The Tuolumne next door was a winner. We moved up to the American. We were with Motherlode rafting, and El Dorado County wanted to dam up the whole South Fork American, so we're organizing over there. That got stopped. Middle and North Fork of the American, threatened by Auburn Dam, and that kind of, well, that's a whole nother story. But then we get up here and we go, they're going to dam in our backyard. It's just like, no way. So that's, to say something about her commitment to take on that job. I'd also like to reference a name, Gracie McKenzie. Is it familiar to anybody here? And she had sent out a kind of valedictory email. Who got it? I don't know. Her musician friends? Or just, yeah. So the name in a newspaper for her in autumn of '83 would be Linda Miller, Lynda. Then her younger son was not so young, and she revived her music career as Linda Grace. And so if you can get a hold of that copy, she explains how she is the mother of SYRCL, thought up the name. We had met at a county supervisors meeting. And if you read that, so South Yuba River and then CL, I like Citizens League because it has Zen in it. And if you read it carefully, you might not be sure if she was contemplating by the full moon in September or October that year. But it doesn't matter because it's the same moon. Right, so, but she gave SYRCL its name, and I'd just say whatever gang of 5 or gang of 10, by the time, say, 2 years in, I was burnt out. We were ready to quit, but SYRCL was in good hands, very good hands. And let's see, where'd the name, okay, well, enough, but look at that email, because that's at first when there's nothing but a slow growing dream, there's music for that. But I'm sure our petitions in spring '84 to preserve the river, 39 miles.
Well, thank you so much. That is unfortunately all the time we have for this sort of formal program, but there's lots of happy hour to happen. There's still lots of film festival to enjoy. And I will say that as the current executive director of SYRCL, the energy, the love, the continued passion is inspiring. And I feel incredibly fortunate and I don't use the term lightly, but blessed to be standing on the shoulders of giants, of the work that you all have done and the community. People say we do great work, and I look to you all as laying that foundation.
Aaron, just one more point. I brought a bunch of newsprints from the union. Pass them around, have them, and remember, or try to remember, what we did 25 years ago.